Good evening, my brothers and sisters. Let me welcome you to this evening's broadcast of From Mango Tree Dialogues, a forum in which we discuss the issues of the day and we comment on various topics. This evening, as you know, is the evening when we talk about Jamaica and the diasporan issues. And this evening, I'm going to concentrate, of course, on two things coming out of the Jamaican experience. And the first having to do with the emancipation celebrations that are taking place in the island right now, as I speak. And secondarily, to talk about the issue of the recent release of Vybz Kartel and his co-accused from prison. In a very strange way, they seem to intertwine. And I'll say something more about that. So I hope that you've been having a very good day and that the celebrations that are taking place now in the independence, I'm anticipating independence already. That's coming next Tuesday. But that you have let your hair down and that you're having a little fun. We've gone through a lot quite recently. And I'm sure that especially the people who have been most affected by the Hurricane Beryl and are still recovering, and there are still areas that have not yet gotten back light. And water is a problem. And certainly telecommunications, internet, and all that, tends to be a little spotty for some people, especially in the areas that have been hardest hit. So while there are those Jamaicans who are able to really be out there and celebrating, there still have a great number of people who are going through a very rough time, and we need to remember them. But I'm in the mood for celebrating in the our emancipation, and because it's a very important event. And you will notice that I'm in my colors. I don't have the black, green, and gold, but here I am, celebrating the bright colors of the tropics. And that's the kind of mood I'm in, and I hope that you will also be able to feel the mood and get in it as well. All right, I need to say a few things about emancipation. As I said before, it is a very significant event that took place in the British colonies all the way back in 1838, when after years of struggle, years of agitation by some that, the abolitionists, William Knabe and, some of these guys that you may recall from your history. But significantly, which is sometimes not mentioned in the discussion of abolition, the role that slaves themselves played in their own liberation. And I say that especially with regard to what some historians regard as the slave rebellions, that the planters in some of these colonies, and especially in Jamaica, and Jamaica was particularly had a reputation for the slaves to rebel. You remember the Sam Sharp Rebellion? We are not a people that like to have our freedoms taken from us. Whether you transport us from all over the world, and you bring us to Jamaica, when you touch that soil, it is as if there is something about that soil that cries, freedom! We don't like subjugation, oppression, anybody putting their boots on our necks. So what I'm saying, going back to the abolitionists, is that while there are those who in certain official capacities, the church, the Baptist church especially, and others, did their part in agitating before the British Parliament and so on behalf of the slaves, because it was certainly a matter of conscience that one set of people could subjugate another, rob them of their dignity, enslave them, take their labor without paying for it. So while there were those who were agitating for that, we need to remember, in the colonies themselves, slaves who rebelled from time to time and who were constantly agitating, wanting to have their freedom. They might not have been able to express it as openly as they would have wanted to, but nonetheless, they were not easily put down. And so what I'm saying is that we need to recognize their own contribution to their own liberation. It was not something that was just done by some white men over in Westminster, so to get us the emancipation thing that was signed in 1838. So I just wanted to make that point and to recognize that when we talk about emancipation and Emancipation Day, on a day like today, when we're celebrating that day, that we need to remember that there are those of our ancestors who made that contribution, and that what we are doing is honoring their names, honoring their contributions, and recognizing their place in the history books as well. One can argue that there were events that outside of the agitation and so on, that Britain was at the point where the colonies weren't proving to be that successful in terms of its capitalistic designs in the New World. And, was at the point where they were ready to give up the colonies, the slaves, end slavery as it was. It had become untenable because it wasn't really working out to be that profitable in certain regards. But nonetheless, they did not willingly, I cannot see them willingly signing an emancipation proclamation or an emancipation document letting the slaves go. But it is now history. That was done. But the question that still arises, and sometimes we talk about the slaves being free, and we have to ask ourselves sometimes a very critical question as to whether a mere signing of an emancipation declaration gave freedom to the slaves themselves. Because many had nowhere else to go. Many remained on the plantations. The things that were promised to the slaves, the newly freed slaves, were not given to them. And so the masters, the plantocracy, many of them remained on the plantation, at least being paid now, but very menial, because they had to pay now for their boarding and their lodging and all that sort of thing. Like they had nowhere to go until later on, when the freed villages were established through the churches. and people were able to move off after a while. But immediately, they were not free. And so we need to remember that, but we also need to remember that ever since that Declaration of Emancipation, right down to the present time, there is still that question as to whether we have emancipated ourselves from the whole idea of the slave mentality that still seems to pervade the minds of so many people. The kind of thinking that is still there as to whether slavery itself, as an institution of oppression, has done deep psychological damage to the Jamaican psyche, and that collectively today we are still suffering as a result of that. I've heard arguments, on both sides of that concern. And I don't think that there is any specific thing, scientific even, to come down on one side or the other, because society is a very permeable thing. It's not given to any one side fitting everybody or one suit fitting everybody. And so there are different thinking about this particular thing as to whether we are still under the psychological damage that was exercised by slavery upon the Jamaican population, and that today the behavior of people, the bad behavior, let me put it that way, of people in so many forms in our national life are direct results of the psychological damage that has been done. For example, you've heard it said that men behave the way they do towards their women because of what was passed down through the plantation system, of how the males were treated on the plantations, how they were used, as to provide breeding stock, to put it, as raw as that, for the plantation. And so that has persisted down through to the present time. One can argue that. I'm not going to do it this evening, but I have my own thoughts on that. Because after so many years, I don't know if we can easily claim that when we treat our women the way we do, that we are doing so because of some external compulsion, going all the way back to slavery. I cannot tell you that I buy that argument, to tell you frankly. Because people are no free agents. And what they have learned, they can unlearn. If they learned that behavior during slavery, I can't see that it has permeated through the DNA of the psyche of our people to think now that when they behave and carry out violence against their women, that it is going all the way, harkening all the way back to that experience. That to me is an easy cop out that people prefer, put forward. And I don't buy into it, to tell you frankly. But anyway, as I said, I'm offering commentary, and you're free to challenge me on anything that I say. But that is as it is. The Emancipation Declaration, where Jamaica today is having a national holiday in celebration, it had gone through some iterations, but finally came down to the point where in 1997, the Patterson administration declared the 1st of August to be Emancipation Day, a national holiday where people can celebrate and remember their ancestors and the struggles that they went through to win their freedom, inspiring us today that we too must not accept things as given, but that we can challenge principalities and powers and status quos, especially oppressive status quos, so that we can make a better life for our people. So I remember at the time when the government was trying to reinstitute, because it had been a holiday at one point, and then independence came before independence, then independence came in 1962, and so it was discontinued as a national holiday and independence celebrated. And then fast forward to 1997, and when the Patterson administration, as I said, reinstituted it, and we now have the celebration. I remember the contention, why we have too many holidays? That was one of the arguments. And another argument was that why not, you have Emancipation Day on the 1st of August. If you're to have it at all as a national holiday, why don't we now just twin it with independence, which was just 5 days later on the 6th of August? And some people even suggested Emancipendence as the nomenclature for that particular celebration. But, it's all a matter of semantics, as far as I see it. In these days, I guess, if when things are so rough and tough on people, if you get another day to celebrate, I don't know to what extent today is permeating the consciousness of the wider society, of the whole society, to what extent people are bought into this. I don't think if people truly answer the question, whether many could say that with any great certainty that the day grabs them and what it celebrates grabs them. They may know about what it's about, but to say it grabs them to the point of looking at themselves, looking at where they are in their own struggles for life, whether it makes any great difference, I don't know. But it's a day when people can pull aside and have a little relaxation, I guess, and so on. But I hope that in the midst of all that, there's a thought that can be spared for the importance of what we celebrate. And we're not just celebrating the British ending of slavery. We are celebrating the struggles of our ancestors to be free. If there's nothing to be learned, let it be learned that oppression of any sort must never be tolerated by any people. Oppression of any sort must not be tolerated by any people. We are all created in the image of God. We are all free agents. And for one set of people to think that they can have dominance over another, for one ruler, Maduro, to think that you alone can rule, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Viktor Orban, yeah, I'm calling you out, and all your wannabes, especially those in the United States on one side of a political party. If you think that your ideas alone must carry the day, when you have a population of 40 million, 50 million, 100 and odd million, 300 and odd million other minds, and you think that you can put your boots of oppression on their backs, that's ungodly. Could never have been intended by any creator for any one person or any one set of people to do that. And we need to wake up to the forces that are trying to do that. I mean, take Cuba, for example. A lot of people laud the Castros for what they call the Cuban Revolution and what they've been able to do there. And yes, in many respects, they have had some very good going with especially with the education and health aspects of the society. Cuba trains doctors and sends them all over like in Africa and Caribbean right now. Some are in Jamaica. Jamaicans have gone to Cuba and have been trained as doctors. So in terms of certain social things, yes. But could Cuba have been better if the people were free? If under the 50 years of Fidel Castro, if the people were free to have their own self-determination and to decide what they want through parliamentary elections or presidential elections, couldn't Cuba have been a better place? Yes, I hear the argument about America and the sanctions that they have imposed on Cuba, causing all kinds of things, the reversal in the economic fortunes of Cuba. And I can understand that. But what if you had the people free and they were able to express themselves and you never had these sanctions and you never had one person thinking that it is his idea alone that is important, or a cabal of people coming together thinking that it is what they say should rule the day? What if you never had that? I can tell you, I'm not a betting man, but I could easily bet that Cuba would be far better than it is today. The contest of ideas is the key to progress. And that is why I said, and I go back to it, no people should allow a few to dominate them, to subjugate them, and to tell them how and what to think. And that's what I get out of the emancipation thing. If there's anything that I get out of it at all, quite apart from a holiday where you can cool out. But if there's anything I get out of it, it is that the human spirit refuses to be subjugated. Free it up, and life will expand into a better way. So Jamaicans, let us enjoy our emancipation. Independence comes on Tuesday. And I will have some things to say about that. But I can give you a hint, because I have been very consistent in my writings and in my statements that I can never really accept Jamaica as being independent until we throw off the last vestiges of colonialism. What do I mean by that? We cannot say that we are independent and we make the laws in our parliaments and they can only be signed into law by a representative of the king in England, the colonial power who had us in slavery, who subjugated us. Still, he has to sign off before it can become law. And when it does become law, and there is any dispute of any citizen with regard to that law, in terms of, going through the court system, and you have to make an appeal now. You can't do it in Jamaica, not even with the CCJ. You take it to the colonial power, the Privy Council. That's when I hear some people talking that you must retain the Privy Council. They don't understand the collective denigration of the mind that has taken place and over time, and how we need to be free. And to think that you're free, you're independent, but even in the most fundamental aspects of your judiciary, you can't even make your own independent judgment. You have to send it to Buckinghamshire in England. And you talk about independence, and the king is still head of state. Come on. So yes, I celebrate. It's another holiday, and people really have fun. It is the funnest, if I can use that word, holiday that we have. I guess next to Christmas. And people really do enjoy, because the government goes out of its way to really make sure that we have all kind of dances and John Kuno and all kind of stuff. But outside of that, I'll never feel comfortable that I'm independent and that I'm celebrating independence. When we carry out the constitutional reform and we really put power in the hands of the Jamaican people, then I will feel really independent, but not one day before. But like I said, I'll have some more to say about that, but I just want to give you a little indication. All right, so talking now about the Privy Council and all them things, takes me to the next matter that I want to discuss with you. And that has to do with the freeing of Vybz Kartel, the world boss, as they call him. His real name is Mr. Adidja Palmer, or Adidja Palmer, and he's now 48 years old. He and his co-accused were set free, interestingly, and this has to be his Emancipation Day. I'm sure he's feeling particularly blessed that he was set free just yesterday, 31st of July. And of charges that were preferred against him. He and a few others were accused of killing a gentleman by the name of Clive Lizard Williams, Lizard in quotes, in 2000 and somewhere he was tried in 2014. They were tried in 2014 and found guilty of the murder. I just want to give you the context, because context is everything. It's very important. So just bear with me here. So in 2000, so they were found guilty after a very, it was one of the, I don't know if I can use the word celebrated, the most celebrated legal cases in Jamaica in recent times, in that, it attracted the attention of the nation and worldwide, because especially, areas of the diaspora, because that the Vybz Kartel was one of the most prominent music dancehall artists in Jamaica. And at the time of his arrest, he was riding the waves of success in that particular genre of music. So the trial took place, and during the trial, one of the jurors did some action with trying to influence the other jurors, to bribe them. And the upshot of it is that even with all of this, the prosecutors the defense lawyers, everybody knowing that that had taken place, the court still allowed the trial to proceed. And having allowed it to proceed, they eventually found the men guilty. And so his lawyers, I mean, Kartel's lawyers, and the lawyer for the other men, or Sean Storm, I think his name is, appealed the judgment that was given, citing, of course, the jury tampering that took place. And the final thing is that the case went to the Privy Council, the final determining court, what they call now the apex court, the top court, for final determination. You remember I said earlier that Jamaica doesn't have the ability. We have an appeals court. And so the appeals court is not the final court. If don't matter who the citizen is and what he has committed, if he has done something wrong and he's found guilty, he can appeal that judgment, and it goes through the appeals court. And then if he doesn't get justice there, then he can take it all the way to the Privy Council. And this is what the lawyers for the defense did. And so a judgment was rendered by the Privy Council that found the tainting of the jury pool to be reprehensible, and that the trial should not have been continued on the basis of that tampering. That the men who were found guilty, that kind of judgment should not have been rendered, because the trial obviously should not have proceeded with the tampering having taken place. So what happened now, they sent it back to the Jamaican court, the Court of Appeal, to look at it again and to determine whether in their judgment there should be a retrial of the men. That took place over a number of weeks, and which up to this point, the men would have served about 13 years, because it started in 2014. They were incarcerated in 2014, when the trial had concluded. So they would have spent a good 13 or so years in prison, pending the appeal of this judgment. And so the appeals court sat, deliberated, I'm just giving you very quickly, deliberated, and then handed down their judgment yesterday that the men should be set free. One of the reasons that they gave, one of the very important reasons, was the declining health of Mr. Palmer, and the whole matter of the tampering of the jury. Also, whether one of the things that they deliberated on was whether it suited the society to put the men through a retrial when witnesses might have died, original witnesses might not be forthcoming, testimonies that were given, the passage of time, the discussion of the thing in the public domain. So they thought that the just thing to do was to release the men, and that they did. So today, you could easily say that it for him, for Kartel and his compatriots, is Emancipation Day Kartel style. You know, a number of observations. Let's look at the jury tampering first. How can it be that you have a juror or jurors trying to influence others on the jury pool with a bribe, and you continue with that trial? I'm no lawyer. I'm just Miss Iris, boy from New Forest. But how do you proceed with a trial that has such a taint? One would have thought that they would have just in light of what had taken place, because you don't know the extent to which the minds of the jurors might have been poisoned, to discontinue the trial at that point and to start a retrial. But of course, that the prosecutors never appeared as if they wanted to go down that road. And so they proceeded ahead, and this is what is the outcome. That has led some people, to think that the Privy Council needs to be retained. They're saying that this big, great judgment that was given, this just outcome that flowed from them, is a good reason why we should have the Privy Council. I really don't buy that argument still, because while it is a significant development, yes, and it was the appropriate thing to do, any court that is really worth its name would have seen that that is the case anyway. So I am not surprised in a way that they ruled that way. But to say that is a justification for retaining the Privy Council when there are so many other things that are problematic with regard to that, and I mentioned one or two of them earlier, I don't see it. But at the very least, where a jury pool has been contaminated, you need to stop the trial. You don't have to be a lawyer to know that, right? A second thing is that, I don't remember which of these British law lords who said it, but he said that justice must not only be done, but it must manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done. In other words, you cannot leave any room to search for the truth. The DPP's office is not there, or the prosecutors are not there to just find a man guilty about anything. They are there to protect the best tenets of the law, to make sure that justice itself isn't just done, but at least to the rest of us, it is manifestly and undoubtedly is seen to be done. That didn't happen in that case. And then now to think that you could even have a retrial. Because I don't know if at some point, they could have withdrawn the case before even the appeals court got it. I don't, like I said, I'm no lawyer. I don't know the fine points there. But what if they were able to withdraw it and they didn't do it? They still wanted the appeals court to look at it and hopefully canvass for a trial. What kind of trial would these men get? after the passage of time? What kind of good trial, just trial could they get in the absence of evidence, witnesses, the passage of time that has eroded people's memory and knowledge of what might have happened? How could the justice have been served to the men who had already spent 13 years, as I said, in incarceration? In my mind, they would have paid their dues. And you can now visit it upon them that they, because of your mishandling, the appeals court I'm thinking of here now, because of the trial courts continue with the trial when the jury pool was already tainted. You cannot now lay that at the foot or at the feet of the accused. They have nothing to do with that. And to think that you could hold them for so long and then come back now and say, boy, we're going to still hold you. We're going to still detain you. For how long? Who knows? And let me tell you something, there is something that is amiss in the justice system in that country, in Jamaica. If a retrial was ordered, and this is one of the concerns that the appeal court had. If a trial was reordered, how soon could the men be tried? And no good answer was forthcoming. I remember, the news clips and the response that was made to that particular concern. I think it was a concern by the present appeals court. It's Marva McDonald, who is now the head of the appeals court. She's the one who was questioning them on that basis. And congratulations to her. From what I've heard, it seems as if she's going to do a good job. I'm sure that her argument had a strong sway in the final determination of justice in this particular case. So how are you going to, deal with the men on that basis? And say that you're going to give them a just trial when you can't even be sure when the person could be tried, because the answer that she got back when she asked how soon after do you think that these men could be tried was very fuzzy. They didn't know themselves. And to have the men continue in detention while you well, you fiddle. Let me put it that way. I want to be kind. Does no justice is not a manifest or undoubted practice of law and justice? But there's something, as I said, that is amiss, because this particular case has brought to the attention of the nation that there are many people, well, I shouldn't say many, that there are people in the judicial system, in the penal system, whose retrial have been ordered by the appeals court, and they have not been tried. I understand there's one there for 20 years. Is it that they don't have the resources? How can this be just? Mr. Chuck, how can this be just? I would strongly suggest to the government that they carry out an audit of their penal institutions to determine the number of people who are there, whose cases have been reordered for trial, for retrial, and isolate them and get them going. Let the chip fall where they may. There may be innocent people inside there who, on retrial, could be set free, like these. So what if you had ordered a retrial for Kartel and his friends? And they're going to have to just sit and await the kind of laborious, tedious court system. That can't be right. So I would urge the government, and I would say to Mr. Delroy, who is the Minister of Justice, sometimes talk a strong talk. Talk a strong talk in this regard, and go and try to identify the number of people who might be sitting there now, wasting away, and their retrial has been ordered by the courts. Find them. Just like a man who was lost in the system for how many years, forgotten in the system. The man almost died inside there for, I think it was almost 40 years he was languishing in the system. If you're going to imprison people, then for heaven's sake, man, seek justice one way or the other for them or for the victims. So let's see what happens. This case has brought out a number of things. Can't go through all of it now. I've highlighted the main ones. But I think that in the judgment of the appeals court, justice has been served in this particular matter. You know, I had been wanting to make some written comments. You know, I write a column for the Jamaica Observer, and I was hoping to make some written comment. I was just itching, but you know, this thing about cases that are sub judice, when they're being discussed by the courts, you try not to use public opinion and influence situation. So I held off. And these are the exact thoughts that were going through my mind. And I had a very strong feeling. I wasn't really surprised, to tell you the truth. And you can say, oh, you're just saying that because now they've been free. Well, say that if you want, but I'm just saying. I was of the very strong feeling that they would have been set free, because on the basis of what was being presented and with Privy Council having ruled, there's no basis in which any conscience could have allowed for the men to be further incarcerated, retried in the context of what I just spoke of. But there's another element to it, and that we must never forget that there is another family, the family of Clive Lizard Williams. They have not had a body to bury. And there must be some real pain that they have gone through. And now to see the men, the accused, walk free, it has to further the intense pain that they must be feeling. But again, who has wronged them in not getting a just outcome to how they see this thing should have worked itself out? The system that failed to try to stop the trial when the jury pool was tainted. When they failed to stop the trial at that point, they were doing also not just an injustice to Kartel and his group, but they were doing it also to Clive Williams, the people. Because no justice could have been had there. So in a very real sense, the system failed them as much as it failed Kartel and the others. And we must not brush these things under the carpet, but face them, because that is how we're going to reform the system for the better. But I grieve with them. It's not easy to lose a loved one. But I want them at the same time, and those who think that they have been wronged, to realize how they have been wronged, and at what points in the system that they have been failed by the system itself. No amount of hand wringing can bring back their loved one. And so I say to them, as much as I believe justice has been done in this particular case, given the context of my comments, I say to them, do not lose heart, but let us all seek to reform the system so that we can have one that best represents the interests of the Jamaican people. That's what we finally, I think, that we can all take from this. That we must all be alert and vigilant so that the entire system undergoes the kind of reform that I know we're capable of making happen. Sometimes it is just a kind of nonchalance that causes things to slide. People are not vigilant enough. And frankly, some people don't take their work too seriously, as they should. Because if they were very serious, they should have seen that there's no way that bright lawyers on the defense side, people like Bert Williams, would not have seen what happened and took it up and take it up, to the logical conclusion that was reached. Sorry, I said Bert Williams, Bert Samuel. Sorry, Bert. Bright liars, that would have picked it up. So they think they would have gotten away with that. Tampering, the jury being tampered and so on. But let all of us, we are a great nation. And that's why I find there's an intertwining of emancipation. This year's celebration of emancipation. And this particular case. Because in a real sense, this is not about, Vybz Kartel. And it's not even so much about the plaintiff, the lawyers representing or Clive Williams. It's about a nation. And it is about the values and the traditions that we all are supposed to hold dear. That's what it's about. I'm gonna, in the spirit of emancipation, I'm gonna drink a toast to Jamaica as we celebrate this year's emancipation, and wish the nation well as you do so. So friends, those of you who are celebrating, and those who are not able to celebrate. Because as I said, the impacts of burials still linger. Enjoy yourselves, but keep it safe. Keep it safe. We don't want to hear about any loss of lives because of accidents on the road or by any kind of violence by the gun or by the knife or by a 2x4. We don't want to hear about anything like that. Keep it safe and enjoy yourselves. All right, so we've come to the end of the program for tonight. I'd like to wish you all the very best. And whatever you do, in word or deed, well, good. Good night.